but we're going to go through task 2 today, what you signed up to. We focused on task 3, 2, 4, and 6 because they're the human marked written ones. So tonight we're going to go through the task 2. Anita, in answer to that question, save everyone else. Do you want to drop me an email to Nick Craggs at fi.co.uk? I'll tell you that. Cool. So can you all see where it says task 2 in the chief examiner's report? Cool. So task 2 really, in fact, we'll scroll up a bit. Task 2 really used to be the one students really, really struggled on. But you can see here, I mean, let's be honest, 40% of people pass this task. It's not like they're absolutely nailing it now, but it is not the worst task like it used to be. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Examiners change how to write questions, but training providers bulk up their resources after feedback from the chief examiner. So you can see from the chief examiner, task 2, it brings in other things from other units. So just for a recap, you need to know budgeting, you need to know decision control, and you need to know financial statements. But that being said, you don't need to know everything from budgeting, decision control, and financial statements like you do at the level 3 Synoptic. You only need to know certain things. So you do some from the accounting systems and control, some from budgeting, and some from decision control. Now, these are the only learning outcomes that come up in this task. There are other learning outcomes in other tasks. But for example, group accounting for financial statements will never, ever, ever be in this exam. So in the folder, this isn't in the folder. This is the chief examiner's report, which is on the AAT learning portal. You have access to this, and you should all be using the chief examiner's reports. You know, the really good resources. But I just want to go through this and talk about where students perhaps do well and perhaps not do well. Now, the one thing that used to catch a lot of people out on task 2 is what the examiner has asked you to do and make sure that you do it. So normally what happens is students are provided with budgetary information, so like a budget and a set of actual results or something like that, and then asked to evaluate areas such as the budget planning process, the assumptions made when producing the budget, or on evaluation of the business performance. These are not the same things. So what I would see typically from students is they would see a budget and a set of actual results, and they would go straight into an evaluation of the business performance, which is fantastic if that's what you were asked to do. But be honest, this unit is about accounting systems and controls and the assessment of whether they are good or not and the improvement of them. So if I was a betting person, more likely coming up is evaluating the planning process or the assumptions within the budget. So for example, going back many, many years to an old AAT sample assessment, they were given a budget and set of actual results, and students go, oh, they didn't meet the budget because, I don't know, a typhoon put the price of coffee up or something like that. Something like that. But that's not what they're looking for. They're not looking for why did the business not meet its budget. They're looking for, was the budget a good budget in the first place? So one of the things was, we're going to increase all our costs by 2.5% because of inflation. Yeah, that seems a good decision. They then increased all their costs by 10% because they thought the volume of sales was going to go up, which in returns to variable costs would be a good decision. But your rent's not going to go up by 10% because you produce more. So they've increased all costs. So that's like, actually, that was a poor assumption within the budget. So does everyone see what I'm getting at here is you might be asked to evaluate the business, but if you might not, and don't go down that route of just going, the business didn't do this, the business did that. It's the budget in the controls. Remember the name of the unit. Um, the only other thing that sometimes is well worth doing, it comes up from about level 2 and level 3, is control account reconciliations, which is a great control, but knowing what might mean that there's a difference between the sales ledger and the sales ledger control, and trying to maybe recap the flow of information from the books of prime entry to the main ledger, things like that. But it's not a massive thing. It is, and to be honest, the vast amounts of learning outcomes are decision and control. Financial statements is in there as not a token gesture, but it's financial statements is just ratios, pretty much. Task 5 is ratios. You are going to have to calculate ratios. If we scroll back up, you can see task 5. Well, students do really, really well on that because it is ratios, and you know what's going to be there. You're going to have to calculate ratios. So, make sure you get enough time on task 5. Now, you've only got 6 tasks. If you miss one, you're going to struggle to do the exam. So you've got to be quite militant in your time. So you've got to do them all. But if it was me, and in terms of a plan of how you do your tasks, I would do task 1 first, because it's the first thing you're going to see, and it's one that's automatically marked, and it's one that students do well on. It'll calm your nerves, get some marks on the board straight away. And hopefully, if you do a little bit faster than that, it frees up some time. I would then move on to task 5, because again, it's automatically marked. Students do well on it. Again, settles nerves and for all the previous reasons. I would then move on to task 3 third, because it's one that you know what you're going to get. You're going to have to come up with some weaknesses in the accounting systems. You might have to come up with some recommendations, you might not, but you know what you're going to get. I'd then move on to task 6, because you're going to get a SWOT or a cost-benefit analysis, whether it's a financial cost-benefit analysis or a non-financial cost-benefit analysis. You've got a fair idea of what's coming up. And then I would move on to 5. Because, for the 5th question, I would do task number 4. It's quite decision controlling, for want of a better phrase. It could be a few things. Students do struggle with that. And then I would leave task 2 to the end. I think it's the harder of the tasks. And so I always think it's easier to get the first couple of marks. So if you are short of time, you can get some easy marks on task 2, whereas you don't want to be being short of time on task 1 and 5. That's what I would suggest. You can, like I used to be on exams, to be honest, start from task 1 and go to task 6, and as long as you're careful with your time, you'll be all right. But if it was me, I would jump around just to get task 2. Yeah, cool. Anyway, sorry, I'm rabbiting on all night. So as you can see here, students are doing a lot better than what they were. It used to be one that students really do struggle with. And as it says here, managing time in the assessment is really, really important. You should work out how many minutes you've got on that task, work out when you started it, when you need to finish it. And if you've run out of time on that task, move on, because either 2 things are happening. One is you're struggling and you're not doing very well, or 2, you're absolutely nailing it and you've written loads. In fact, you've written more than there are marks available and you're just wasting your time. The mark scheme is very strict. There'll be X numbers of marks available for that part of that task. Once you've got them all, you're not getting any more. And the markers can't go, I'll borrow a mark from there, put onto there, because they've written good points. Be very, very militant with your time. Things students do well. Students love calculations. They love it. They like bashing stuff through calculators. Writing and stuff, not quite so popular. And then, sorry, this is the AAT sample assessment. This is the AAT Chief Examiner's report. So you probably haven't got this to hand. And then last, where students don't do quite so well, the scenario, just in terms of the pre-release AEM motors, I get students go, should I read that before the exam? And the answer to that is Yeah, I get students like, I literally have people go, should I bother reading it? I was like, obviously you should read it, but AAT is not a test of your memory. What's going to happen is there's a bit of background in the scenario, read it once, and then something happens in the exam. And that's what you've got to deal with. They've written it for a reason. They don't want people to just get marks from a good memorizing the pre-release. Not like that at all. And like I mentioned before, failure to address the specific requirements of the task. You really must do what it tells you. You know, so if it says, and you've got to be very good with the active word within the question. So if it says identify or state, we're looking for a very, very short answer. If it says explain, make sure you do. If it says describe, make sure you do. If it says evaluate, so evaluate is you're looking at something and is it good, is it bad? So with evaluate type question, always try and give a positive and a negative aspect to something. So one of the questions I've seen that we wrote is evaluate a fixed budget, which is, you know, it's just, it is what it is. Now, with that, students tend to go down the routes of it's rubbish, it doesn't show anything meaningful, you're not comparing like for like, blah, 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 which is all true, but with the evaluate, we are looking for some positives as well. It's quick and easy. Describe is just talk about what is it. Whereas explain, we want to know why is it relevant? How does that affect people? You know, and take it that little bit further than just, for want of a better phrase, describing something. Explain why it's relevant, what it's, how it affects the business, and always take, this is quite general term, but always take it to the nth degree. And remember, we're talking about the business. So one of our mock exams question was like, so-and-so is overworked or something or other. You know, what is the week? Yeah, what are the implications here? And then it's like, I don't know, just picking someone. Sarah in credit control is stressed. And you're like, sucks to be Sarah, but how does that impact the business? You want to take it a little bit further, go, Sarah is stressed. Therefore, she might be off work and we have no one to chase up the bills, which will cost us money if we have bad debts, that sort of thing. Always take the impact on the business. So, you know, really sort of go as far as you possibly can. And like I say, make sure you use all the information in the task because it's there for a reason. Really. Cool. So that's the chief examiner spot. Any questions on that? So now I'm literally just wrapping on 20 minutes. Cool. But the one thing I would stress, if we find it, is really, really make sure you are answering the question that is asked. If you write a really good question, I'm sorry, if you write a really good answer to a question that wasn't asked, you will not get the marks. Cool. Right, so got it here. So here we've got, so in the exam, you will not get a question like this because they're written for every possible, well, they're written for each synoptic window. And these are only indicative of what could come up. But the skills you will gain by practicing these type of questions will allow you to deal with whatever does come up. So the first part we've been asked to do is an explanation, I'm going to cross it out, of the difference between marginal and absorption costing and the benefits and drawbacks of both. Then, and this is again a real good point, if it says you should use a calculation, you should use a calculation. You know, it's one of those things is, it's not, these written questions are not really all about numbers because we can test if you can do something with the automatically marked stuff, but it's more about using your numbers to back up your answer kind of thing. So here, actually, what it's done is told us explicitly what we need to do. Calculate the cost of a service and the resulting selling price under both approaches. But if it's got some numbers, it doesn't specifically tell you what to do, still use them. Because what they do is show significance. And so, for example, if I'm literally making this up now, if one selling price of one product is greater than another, say by how much, and always give an absolute figure and percentage if possible. So if, I don't know, the sales price is 10%, is £10 more than the other one. Now, if you're selling cars at like £30,000 each, £10 isn't that much. If you're selling, I don't know, pencil cases, one at £10 and one at £20, that is significant. So if possible, try and give an absolute figure and a percentage to show significance, because like I say, £10 difference in the price of a car is not very interesting. Cool. Right. Anyway, so we've got the scenario. What I would do is, before I do this, read the question. What I wouldn't want to do is read the scenario you've been given, then read the question, decide what you need to do, and then go back and reread the scenario. I would read the question first and then go back to scenario. So AEM are going to revisit their calculations for the standard cost of a vehicle service and determine if they'll offer 3-year service plan at a guaranteed discount off the standard servicing price. Cool. So we've given some information, it's been there. So what I would do is I'd get the calculation out first, because it's done, it's easy. It's not easy, but it's something that you've got to do it, tick the box, and that will give you the information, and then perhaps talk about it if you wanted to. So we've got some parts to it. You've got, the first bit we've given is mechanics time. 2 hours of mechanics time at a rate of £32 per hour, which I'm not even at this time, and I don't need to get my calculator out for that. So you've got labour, which is 2 times £32 equals £64. There's 1 mark. There's 1%. You're doing all right. Then we've got some parts, and the cost of spare parts used per service is £30. Nothing particularly exciting there. £30 is £30, really. Now, the next one is oil. So each vehicle requires 5 litres of oil, costing £7 per litre. However, 5% of the oil gets spilled. So what is the issue here? So each one needs 5 litres at £7. Now, you've got to be careful with this, so that we lose 5% of what we buy. So, like, we don't want to increase it by 5%. What we want, the 5 litres is what we've left with once we've lost 5%. So 5 litres is actually 95% of what we need to buy. So what you do is gross it up. So we would divide it by 0.95. Or another way of thinking about it is 5 litres divided by 95% gives you 1 litre. Then 1%, then multiply by 100 gives you 100%. So, can't do this one in my head. So if we need 5 litres left after we've lost 5%, so 5.95 means we need 5.26 litres per service. Does everyone get that? It was £7 a litre, wasn't it? It was £36.84. Cool. That's a bit of old production budget stuff from budgeting. So right for that. So the next cost is the fixed overheads. So obviously that's where absorption costing comes in. But we've been asked to calculate the resulting selling price under both marginal and absorption. So this here is our marginal cost. Remember, marginal is the sort of variable cost. If we make one more, what will it cost us? So if we make one more, we will need to increase labor. We will need more spare parts. We will need to use more oil. But our fixed costs will not change because they're fixed. So our marginal cost will be 64 plus 30 plus 36.84 gives £130.84. Now, don't stop there because we must give the examiner what they want. And what they want is the resulting selling price. And they use a markup of 20%. So if we're using markup of 20% to come to a selling cost, what are we going to multiply it by or divide it by or whatever? Yeah, so markup is based on cost. So the cost is 100%. The selling price is something above 100%. Whereas margin is where the selling price is 100% and the cost will be a percentage of that, or the profit, gross profit, that will be a percentage of that. We're using markup. So our cost of £130.84 is going to be multiplied by 1.2. Gives us a selling price times equals that times 1.2, figure of £157.01. So that's our marginal selling price. We also need to do absorption. So we've only got one overhead. I mean, probably if you got a question like this, they'll only give you one because if you can do it once, you can do it 1,000 times. So we've got fixed overheads of £112,500 a year, and with 15 hours being worked. So we're going to absorb it on labour hours. So that's going to be, I can remember this, 112,500 divided by 15,000. Gives an OAR, 15,000, of £7.50. But that's the overhead absorption rate per hour, not per unit. So we need to multiply it by 2, gives £15. So put in our fixed cost in there, gives a total cost for absorption costing of £130.84 plus the £15 cost, not 15,000, I don't do that, £145.84. 84. And again, we're still using markup because that's what we do. 145.84 times 1.2 gives a figure of £175 and 1p. So there's quite a few calculations in here, which is probably going to be quite a few marks, but it's not all the question. Was everyone all right? Was everyone all right to there with the calculations? Cool. Right, the next question. Oh, maybe we can blank with a pay for this. Well, so next part of the question is an explanation between the differences between marginal and absorption costing and the benefits and drawbacks of each. So this is where we have some crowd participation. Now, in terms of the explanation, marginal is all variable costs, whereas absorption, you'd want to put it into nice sentences. Includes overheads. And therefore, it's going to be more expensive. But this is where get you involved. What about the advantages and drawbacks of each? So let's talk about marginal costing. So what's an advantage of marginal costing? Yeah, I mean, that's the first one I would go with. It's simple, if you can spell it, and quicker. You know, don't dismiss that. Just because something's more complicated and you think might be more accurate or whatever, without giving too much away. You've got to assess is like, is it worth the effort, that kind of thing. Right, what else have we got? Yeah, I like that one, Han. Yeah, marginal costing is good for managers on a short-term basis. Because, say, for example, someone came to us, so it's short-term. So short-term is, say it costs us £150 to make. If someone says, I will buy off you whatever it is, and I'll pay you £160. In the short term, that's better than not, because it's £10 that you otherwise wouldn't have got. Long term, it might not cover your overheads. Yeah, margin is good for break-even analysis, margin safety, limited factor. Yeah, I think everyone's got that. So, yeah, that is as well. What about, well, let's talk about downsides of marginal costing. Right. Yeah, so contribution is great. Contribution is not profit. Yeah, and it basically here's what you sell it for, but what so this is what it costs to produce, but what would you sell it for in a long-term sustainable fashion? What about absorption costing? What's good about absorption costing? Yeah, covers all costs, which hopefully leads to a profit. Yes, that's another one. Absorption costing complies with the financial standards, how you're meant to do it. Marginal costing doesn't. That's quite a good technical point. What marks that one? Anything else about absorption costing on a negative side? Yeah, it's time consuming. Yeah, it's more difficult. And the other thing I'd also say is, so if you go back to our question, yeah, use knowledge is, yeah, so we budgeted overheads to be that amount and with 15,000 hours. We are not going to exactly work 15 hours in that period. You'll end up with some over or under absorption. just the way the world works. It's never going to be exactly perfect. So we go back to our question. Let's see what they're trying to achieve. So they want to offer a 3-year servicing plan at a certain price. What would you say is the most sensible way of costing this? Out of marginal or absorption? Yeah, you know, it's not it's something that's going to happen next week. We've got some extra, we can make some extra sales. It needs to be that we are covering all our costs on the long term. So if you're going to make these decisions and it's going to be a 3-year fixed servicing plan, we need to make sure that we are making a contribution or hopefully covering our overheads. Cool. What do you think to that? Do you reckon you could get, with the calculations in there, I mean, I would say that calculation's got to be worth at least 4 out of the 9 marks, if not 5, maybe. So would you get enough points to get the remaining ones? Nick, you can have a go at that. Yeah, and also remember, with PDSY as a mindset, you are not there to turn in a perfect task 1, 2, and 3 and leave everything blank on 4, 5, and 6. You're there to do one thing alone, which is pass an exam. And to that, you get 70%. If you're getting 70%, you get 70% of the marks on task 2, you were doing really, really well, because you'll almost certainly get more than 70% on task 1 and task 5. So if you could get 70% of the marks on this, you've got to be pleased with that. You know, we're not expecting perfection, especially in this task. Cool. Right, the next point is a discussion of how standard costing can help the planning and control of AEM. So remember, it is 3 marks, this. So what we're looking for in a 3 marks question that says discuss is, I would say, 3 well-explained points. Cool. So let's just remind ourselves of the question. How can standard costing help the planning and control of AEM? We're on 3 really good points. And I've got one answer, which I don't like stock answers, but it's a really good stock answer. That's when you see a control, if you're not sure, put this one down. So by having a standard cost for your product, what can you do? Yeah. Han, you are literally 99% there of where I was going with my stock answer. So you compare your budgeted figures to your actual, and what will that give you, Han? Yes. A control is something that you can measure and investigate. So varianalysis is such a good control, because you set a target or a budget and then you don't meet it, whether good or bad, you can investigate it and see why. Varianalysis is a great control. What else? Well, remind us of the question. How can it help the planning and control? So there's 2 aspects to this: control, but also planning. So what can you do if you know the standard cost of a product? in terms of planning and making future projections. Yeah, you can set the price. It's one thing. So you can set the price and say, right, this is what we do. And put that through and hopefully take into some market analysis as to what would be a reasonable price. So you don't want to be charging something ridiculous. But that being said, you don't want to just get the market price and go, oh, that'll be fine if that's what competitors are charging. If you can't make it for that price, so if you know what it costs you to make, you can do that. Yeah, and so it will allow them to, and I would take it back to the scenario. Remember the 20% discount. They work out what it costs. Can we absorb the 20% discount? Well, the actual control is the process of comparing, because you basically, well, for an example would be, out of control is when you just pay anything for your materials and your material cost is through the roof and you've got no way of knowing because you haven't set a budget. So if you've got a budget, you've got to, you can then control the fact to go, actually, what is going wrong here? And then investigate it. Variance analysis is such a good control. Always mention it if you can. Yeah. This is good. Yeah. And then actually, just on a more operational kind of planning thing, if you know, for example, how much oil each service needs, what does that allow you to do from like a day-to-day planning operation? Or labor requirement? Yeah, just literally procure effectively is a very posh way of doing it. Yeah, manage resources. So if you know how many liters each service needs, you can work out how many liters, day-to-day sort of things. If you know how much your material is costing you, you can actually then start looking up where to save it and things like that. So, day-to-day standard costing can help you plan whatever and also allow you to do controls. Now, obviously, these are shocking answers. Do not explain it like that. We would want something a bit more rounded. And the other thing I would mention, it says it in the question, come up here. Yeah. So how can it aid AEM? So what I'd really like to do is take it right to the nth degree. How does this benefit AEM? Yeah, I mean, good point, Meg. If you say kind of, that's getting into slowly deviating into target costing, which could well be in this exam. So if you know what the standard cost of it is and you can't get it for that cost, you've got one or two things. Absorb the extra cost to put the price up, or look at how you can get that cost down with with a cost gap analysis. So my material's gone up, can we save it elsewhere in terms of labor or something if you can't put the price up? Cool. Right. So that's what I want. 3 nice, well-explained points. And I like to say, if it's take it right to the end of, if it aids AEM, literally, how does it aim? Cost benefit analysis. Yeah, I mean, if you knew the budgeted costs for certain products and you veered into a cost benefit analysis type question, which I think is unlikely. They'd expect you to do work out the standard cost and then flex it for future cash flows and things like that. But in theory, you're right, Karen. You're doing a cost benefit analysis of, in the future, we're going to sell it for, 1,000 products at X amount. Each of these should cost us so and so. What's the profit? Yeah. Actually, that's a really good point. Standard costing can give you targets to work towards. I wouldn't say that was a planning benefit, though, to a degree, more than anything else. But yeah, standard costing gives you those targets. So this is, and remember, you've got the different types of standard as well, whatnot. Anyway, we deviate. So the last question is an explanation of what is meant by a flex budget and how standard costing can help with this. So we'll move it down here. So what would be your definition of a flex budget? Yeah. So a flex budget is, try not to say the word flexed. Flex budget is a budget we have flexed. Doesn't really, if you don't know what flex means, it doesn't really change the effectively volume to match actual. So you're comparing like for like, and I would take it a little bit further, so you can make meaningful comparisons. Yeah. So, it's one of those things you would, if you've produced more, so if you sold more goods, the way the world works, the cost will have gone up. So you're not going, oh, well, the material actually was more than we budgeted on, but you're like, well, I sold twice as much as I budgeted on. That's actually a good thing. So you make a meaningful comparison. So I think it's a pretty decent explanation of what a flex budget is. How does standard costing help with this? Go back to a question. So how does standard costing help with this? Yeah. So without standard costing, I'm not sure how you would flex the budget. So it allows it to be quick. Well, you'd hope it's quickly and easily flexed. Yeah, and also with that's very good. I think it was not just Hans, someone else mentioned it as well. Andrea, yeah, it's more detailed investigation or variances, basically, because your standard cost card will have not just the cost per unit, it will have the usage and the price. So then this links off into two, because like you said, oh, we spent more per unit than we budgeted on. You're like, all right, why? Yeah, literally without standard cost, you couldn't flex the budget, so you can't calculate variances and things like that. So you need to know your budgeted labour rate, for example, or your labour. That's what labour efficiency. just to clarify, you will not have to calculate variances. Please know you won't have to calculate labour, and material price, material usage, or I suppose even in there, if you're being pedantic, you've got idle time. But you won't have to sit and calculate a labour rate variance. That's to say, do not forget about variances. They are, as like I say, a really good control, and it allows you to, if you've got weaknesses in the system, like someone signing overtime off left, right, and centre, or you've got people who are slacking, should we say, or weaknesses where machinery is breaking down, variances will allow you to identify them but you won't have to calculate them. You do need to know them. Now, that being said, don't just stick variances down for any old thing. It needs to be relevant to the question, but variances are a really good control. Standard costing is a great control that allows you to flex the budget. Anything you can measure and investigate is a great control. If you can't measure it, how is it a control? Cool. But again, let's go back to the mark scheme. It's only worth 3 marks. So once we have explained what a flex budget is, you're only looking for a couple of reasonably well explained points to get the full marks. Be very, without going get away from the technical side of it, be very, very specific about the marks available. And the other thing I'll also say is, if it says state 3, don't give more, because they're going to think you're going down a scattergun approach. So choose your best 3, or things like that. Exam technique is just as important as knowing this stuff. No. So what do you think to that in terms of explaining flex variance and to come up with, again, like when we talked about the benefits in planning and control, there are other things you could have come up with, and I think we got more than what we needed. But there is right and wrong answers. There is wrong answers, but that's why we've found mocks. As long as your answer is sensible and reasonable and feasible, you will be fine. Now, in terms of revising the other units, I would make sure you know what is in the exam. Make sure you look at the learning outcomes, because don't revise the stuff you don't need. But ratios, you must know them. And then the rest of it, pretty much, is, budget theory from budgeting. So different types of budget, activity-based costing, zero-based budgeting, incremental budgeting, that kind of stuff, and then decision control. So, and also actually, going back to Megan's question, correct person is, you can't do this because you haven't got a pen where you can type on the screen. Try and tick off each part of the question. So if it says, for example here, planning and control, try and get a point for at least each, because there will be marks available for planning, marks available for control. You want to get them both. So in terms of that sort of question there, so control, variance analysis, whereas these two, these are more planning. What are we going to set the price at? What are we going to buy in terms of resources, in terms of oil or something, say? And like Hans says, the wording of the question can throw you off. So, Andrew says the wording of the question can throw you off. So really do take that time to read that question and be very careful that your answer is answering the question that's been asked. A really good answer that doesn't answer that question, you're not going to get any marks. Yeah, I think that's very, very good saying. And planning at the start of the year, this is what we're going to do. Control is what happened, why, kind of thing. Yeah, because with a control, what you're doing is, no, I don't want to say control again. Yeah, with the control, what you're doing is checking that what happened was in line with what you expected. So did we spend more materials than we budgeted on or less, and why? The same with labor. Control is stopping something from happening, so it stops you, it makes you investigate and things like that, whereas planning is very much what can we use it for. Cool. So apologies, I was down in London on Monday night in Houses of Parliament with AAT. So, but I'm with you for the rest of the professional synoptic revision session. So I'm going to do question 3 and no, done question 3. I'm going to do question 4 and question 6 over the coming weeks. But in the meantime, anyone got any questions on anything task 2 or even just generally PDSY related whilst we are here? Should say we've taken far longer on this question than we were allowed in time, but that's me waffling. But at this moment in time, it's all about exam technique rather than timing. Cool. And just as if you're a first intuition student, do please do your mocks. I know it absolutely sucks to sit and do a 3-hour mock, but you're going to have to do it on exam day. You wouldn't think, oh, I'm running a marathon, so I'll do a few 5Ks and just assume I'll do it right on the big day. Done it. What's what we've got in here? In terms of revision books you can buy for PDSY, if you're not a first intuition student, we have our PDSY mock bank, £15 per. Well, it's £15 for the entire mock bank. And what that does is, because with the AAT sample assessments, which are not even based on the actual scenario, which it is, whereas what they do, when you do them, it'll tell you where you're competent and not yet competent based on the automatically marked stuff, which is literally only task 1 and task 5. Whereas if you're not a first intuition student, if you want an extra practice question, you get our mocks for £15. And what happens is, we wouldn't mark 2 PDSY mocks for 15 quid that takes some marking, but you can go and mark your written tasks with our marking guide, and then it will give you an overall grade taking into account your written tasks, unlike AAT. Struggle applying the systems and controls material to the questions in the mocks. One thing is when you look at task 3, we are specifically looking for errors in the system. So what happens, not things the company does badly, but what are errors in the system. So when you see things like someone usually, normally, that means it's not a foolproof system. And that's an error in the systems. Typically, task 3, there's some quite good errors, and it's just not so much spotting them, but making sure your answers are good enough. Why is it an error in the system? How is that going to affect the business tangibly? So, I don't know, the credit controller only chases the debts up every 2 months. That's a weakness, but that's not a very good answer. This then means debts could go bad. And then go take that further. This means that debts go bad and there is a cost to the company and which will reduce profit, kind of thing. Always take it to the nth degree. I'm not very creative, Jenny. On Monday, I will do task 4 because it comes before task 6. Really? Cool. Cool. Someone just sent me Deborah. Leave that with me. I'll have to get back to you. Top of my head, I can't think of that, but I'll get back to you after this, actually. I'll have you in one sec. Anything else? Anyone for anything? Will there be more videos like this? Next week, yeah. So if you're same time Monday night, 6 o'clock, I'm going to do task 4. Same time Wednesday, I'm going to do task 6. And like I say, if you can't make them, you will be sent the recording as well. Can we say controls wave front wave spin? Yeah, in the long term, control, it would prevent overspend because you go and then investigate why it happened and then stop it. I mean, in the very short term, someone goes buy something tomorrow, it wouldn't happy with that. But long term, you would. Cool. Right. Last 30 seconds to get any questions in. If not, good luck for anyone sitting exam between now and Monday night. Yeah, Megan. So a control, it stops me happening more. You know, if someone goes and does something stupid tomorrow, variance analysis is not going to stop that. But when you do, and you don't have to wait till the year end, just because we do, because it's easier. You can do variance analysis on a much shorter period to stop nip it in the bud. But you know, it's the kind of thing, and there's also it deters people if they're going to do something stupid if they know it's going to be investigated. Yeah, and it helps to create a new control of like, well, someone's doing something with regards to overtime, your labour rates sky high, so let's stop that from happening. Let's make sure the production manager has the right resources and he's not signed off for overtime that it shouldn't. Cool. Right, I shall let you all go. I'll hopefully see most of you at 6 o'clock on Monday night. Well, we'll do task 4. Cool. Right, have a good evening, everyone. All the best.